Okay, friends, thank you for joining tonight. Tonight's topic is bringing the brightest light to shadow inventory. So we're going to be focusing on shadow inventory. So we're going to go in depth into the shadow inventory. We're going to find some awesome deals. We're going to make sure that you understand what shadow inventory is. So let me just quickly explain to you in a nutshell what shadow inventory is. So shadow inventory, this is the inventory that has been foreclosed by the banks. And it's technically in the bank's books. So it's an asset now for the bank and it's not yet for sale, okay? So this is the powerful piece of information. It's technically not for sale and it's owned by the bank. So many investors refer as REO, real estate owned, so by the banks. But something that you need to keep in mind, that when the banks take possession of the property, that happens right after the sheriff or judicial auction, right? So nobody bought the property and then it became the bank's asset. So let me show you the next slide that will clearly show the process. But we're just going to be focusing on the shadow inventory. So this is the foreclosure process, okay? So let me just quickly go through the beginning, but we're going to stop at the shadow inventory. But I just want to make sure that you understand and then you follow the sequence. Okay, so in the United States, there are two types of estates. You have the judicial and the non-judicial. So Illinois happens to be a judicial state. So what that means is that the court system is going to rule the foreclosure process. So there are 25 states in the United States that are judicial. So they've got to go to the court system to foreclose on the owner, whereas non-judicial states such as California does not need to go through the court system to foreclose on the owner. Therefore, non-judicial states like California, they can foreclose on the owner as early as 2 to 3 months. Believe it or not, friends. So it is so fast. I mean, they can foreclose on the owner 2 to 3 months. It's just crazy. That is why those markets rebound so much quicker than non-judicial states. So Nevada, California, primarily the West Coast are non-judicial. So they can foreclose very fast. So let me just quickly explain the foreclosure process so that you understand how it works. So on the left-hand side, we're gonna begin when the owner takes a loan from the bank, and then for whatever reason, the owner defaults on the loan. So the bank, after 30, 60, 90 days, they're going to be reaching out to the owner, and if unsuccessful and the owner is not able to pay the mortgage, then the bank is going to officially file a lawsuit against the owner. So at that point, the file is in the court system. So that is the pre-foreclosure. So the owner is being sued by the bank. And obviously through ChicagoDealVault, you are going to get notified about the pre-foreclosures. And then time goes by. So between 6 and 9 months that the owner has not come current with the loan, pay off the outstanding balance, or do some sort of loan modification with the bank. Then if nothing has happened, if the owner has not done anything, or we as investors have not reached out to the distressed owner to buy the property from them, then what's going to happen is that the court is going to issue the auction date. So that is the notice of trustee sale right here. So it is official that the court has ordered the auction of the property. So they're going to auction the property, and the proceeds of the auction will serve to pay off the creditors. So what we mean by creditors, those are the bank, the mortgagor, okay, and any other creditors, because there might be other liens in the property. So we've seen liens from the village, we've seen liens from the association, from the utility companies. So those type of liens, the lien holders need to be paid off once the property gets auctioned off. But you might have heard that banks have first position and second position, right? You might have heard those terms. So what does that mean? So what that means is that when the bank gives a loan to the owner, they're going to put a lien on the property and they're going to be the first position. Okay, what that means is that when the property gets sold at auction, then the proceeds of the sale are going to go towards the first position. Okay, but let me tell you, even this is something important to keep in mind. Even if the bank is in first position, if there's a lien from the government, primarily like a tax lien, let's assume that the owner fell behind the taxes, then the government is going to get paid first. Okay, so those taxes that are behind, that are unpaid, are going to get paid first, number one. And then second is going to come the first position, which primarily is going to be the bank or the banks. You might have multiple liens from lenders on the property. So an example of that is, let's assume that the property was bought for $100,000, right? So the owner took one loan for, let's say, $50,000, and then they paid $50,000 out of pocket, but later on they tap into the equity. So the owner went ahead and got a second loan on the property. So they tap into their equity. So they got what's called a home equity line of credit. So it's like a jumbo credit card. Therefore, the bank is going to put a lien on the property, and that lien is going to have a second position. Okay, so those liens are going to get paid once the property gets sold at auction. Okay, so now if at this point, once the court has issued the auction date, then this is like one of my favorite pipelines. Why? Because the owners are going to be extremely motivated to sell the property, because guess what, friends? You are going to get notified in the system 30 to 45 days before the property goes to auction. And that is just extremely powerful, right? Because at that point, you have enough time to connect with the owner, get the property inspected on the review by the attorney. Not only that, most importantly, you will get to fund the property using a hard money lender or a private money lender, meaning asset-based funding. So that is extremely powerful. Because you have enough time before the property goes for auction. So if we're able to successfully buy the property before the property goes to auction, guess what happens? The auction gets canceled. So I'm right here. So at the auction, at the judicial auction or sheriff auction, if we happen to buy the property beforehand, then the auction is going to get canceled. Okay, and that is just amazing. Because at that point, you can be paying 50 cents on the dollar, 60 cents on the dollars, because the owner is going to be extremely motivated to sell it. Because if they don't sell the property, and especially if the owner has a lot of equity on the property, they're going to lose the property, they're going to lose the equity, and they're going to ruin their credit. So at this point, they're extremely motivated. But let's assume that for whatever reason, we didn't take action as investors, right, to reach out to the distressed owner before the auction happened. Therefore, the property is going to go to the judicial auction at the courthouse in the county the property resides. So at that point, at the courthouse, you're going to have a lot of investors, right, that show up at the auction. And then they're going to be bidding for the property. So keep in mind that you don't want to be in that position, friends, because the likelihood of you overpaying for the property is very high, because, you know, emotions kick in. So you just want to get the property, right? Thinking that you're getting an awesome deal, and you might buy sight unseen. So you may not be able to see the property from the inside before you buy the property. Not only that, friends, but you're going to need to pay cash for the deal. So a lot of investors have lost thousands and thousands of money going at judicial auctions. So it is very risky. If you don't know, if you don't do enough due diligence on the property, I recommend that you do not do judicial auctions. And then let's assume that for whatever reason at the auction, nobody buys the property. And there could be many reasons why nobody bids on the property. Number one, and most important, the starting bid is too high. Okay, so what that means is that the bank set the starting bid way too high. So seasoned investors, they know what their max allowed offer is going to be when they come into the auction. So if it doesn't meet their criteria, then they're not going to buy the property. They're not going to make a bid on the offer. So if there are no bids at the auction, guess what's going to happen? The auction is going to go to the bank. It's going to, and then at that point, it becomes, they call it shadow inventory, right? Because technically, it's not for sale. It's not available. It's hidden, right? Because at that point, it's in the bank's assets. But guess what? We have those records. So you are going to get notified of the shadow inventory. So why is that so powerful, friends? Because the banks are not in the business of real estate, okay? They're in the business of lending. So what the banks are going to do is they're going to dispose of the property. So they want to get rid of the property. They want to recoup their money, okay? So we're going to look at some examples and then look at the numbers. You know, the rationale behind the starting bid, you know, how the banks come up with the starting bid, right? They're going to do a market analysis on the property just to estimate the ARV, the after repair value on the property. And then based on that, they're going to come up with a starting bid. Not only that, but they also look at the outstanding balance, right, from the owner. So I've seen some starting bids that are just sort of ridiculous, high. Why? Because the owner was underwater. So what does that mean? The owner owed more than the property is worth. So let's assume the property is worth $100,000, but the owner took a, let's say, a HELOC, right? Home equity line of credit, and they tap into their equity, and then the property prices dropped. So the owner is going to owe more than what the property is worth. So we've seen cases, for instance, the owner owes $120,000 when the property is only worth $100,000. So guess what? The bank obviously knows the property is worth no more than $100,000, but they want to recoup their money, right? They're in the sink for $120,000. So what they're going to do is they're going to set the starting bid at over $100,000. So obviously there are not going to be many bidders for that property. So that property will automatically come back to the bank. So that is called shadow inventory, okay? And then, as I said before, the bank is going to dispose of the property. So the bank is going to do either one of two things, or they could happen simultaneously, okay? So what the bank is going to do once they took possession of the property, we're talking about between a week to 4 weeks before the bank disposes of the property. So what they're going to do is, we're right here in the shadow inventory. So at this point, they're going to give the property to an REO broker, so real estate owned brokers. So brokers, real estate brokers who specialize in distressed properties, okay, owned by banks. So they're going to give them to those brokers, and those brokers are going to obviously put it in the MLS. And then at the same time, the banks are going to send these properties to the auctioning platform. So here are the 4 biggest auctions that are out there right now. So we have Hubzu.com, we have auction.com, Hudson & Marshall, and Williams & Williams. Okay, so those are the main auctioning platforms. And then most of them, friends, again, you've got to pay cash, okay, when you buy properties from auction. Not only that, but you're going to need to pay, they call it a buyer's premium, which is about 5%. That's how the auctioning platforms make money, right? So typically when the seller puts the property for sale, the listing agent is going to charge about a 5% commission, right? But guess what? Since this is a bank-owned property, the bank is not going to pay the commission as the seller. is going to be paid by you, by the buyer. So Hubzu is going to tack on that commission as the buyer's premium, okay? Um, so Hubzu, auction.com, primarily they require cash. Some of them will allow you, in certain properties, are going to allow you to finance the deal using a hard money lender or a private money lender. So what I mean by that is most of these properties are not in a livable condition, okay? So what that means is that they might be missing appliances, they might have plumbing issues, electrical issues, HVAC issues, roof issues, so they're not in livable condition. Therefore, they cannot be financed by conventional lenders. So what I mean by conventional lenders, those are the big banks like Chase, Bank of America, Homebridge, Guarantee Rate. Those are conventional lenders. So they are going to finance a property that is in livable condition, okay? If it's not in livable condition, they may finance the property, but they're gonna issue, it's called a construction loan, okay? But you've got to focus on asset-based lenders. So you wanna use lenders that are going to be focusing their attention and analysis on the property itself, right? Because the conventional lenders are going to require like W-2s. They're going to require you income taxes. They're going to be focusing a lot on your credit and not so much on the property itself. So that is why we typically don't use conventional lenders when you buy distressed properties, okay? You want to use asset-based lenders. And in ChicagoDealVault, we have private money lenders, and we also have hard money lenders on their preferred partners. Okay, so we're going to show you that in just a second. So at this point, the properties are going to go for auction, and here you will not only pay the buyer's premium, but again, you are into this bidding game, right? So you will most likely overpay for the property. So having said that, friends, this is what you need to do. We're going to be focusing on targeting shadow inventory. So when the property goes for auction, let's say the property went for auction yesterday. Nobody bid on the property, so it became the bank's asset as of today, right? Today, Wednesday. So at this point, you've got to reach out to the bank, okay? So you can reach out to the bank directly and say, I'm a real estate investor interested in buying the property you just took from auction yesterday, and then you make an offer to the bank directly. So we're going to give you the bank's attorney information, so you can reach out to the bank's attorney directly, and if they're able to help you in the transaction, that's awesome. If not, you may request the asset manager contact information from the bank so that you can get in touch with the bank. But friends, there's a big secret, okay? You've got to go after small banks. What I mean by that, those are the community banks. Because if you find a property that it's owned by, let's say, Chase, Bank of America, all these large banks, they will not sell you the property. Why? Because they handle volume. They want to dispose of bulk inventory. They're not going to sell you or me or anybody just one property. They want to move properties bulk, okay? So this is what's really powerful in ChicagoDealVault. So we have two types of shadow inventory. So we have, number one, the shadow inventory that you can reach out directly to the banks, right? If the deal makes sense. And the secret is that you've got to go after small banks, okay? And the second shadow inventory that we have, we call this the hot shadow inventory. So we have a partnership with a large company in Texas that has great relationships with large banks. So these large banks give the Texas company hundreds of properties on a weekly basis. And guess what? We get about 1,000 properties from large banks on a weekly basis, okay? So why, you may wonder, well, why do we get that inventory? The reason why is because those banks want to sell the property right away before it hits the MLS or before it hits Hubzu, all the auction platforms. You may wonder why Because the bank wants to save money on commissions. They want to save money on holding expenses, right? Because the longer they hold on to the property, the more money they lose. Not only that, but the minute they involve a broker or an auctioning platform, they've got to pay a commission, right? For them to sell the property. It just makes sense, right? So they want to sell the property right away. So we're getting these 1,000 properties a week before they hit the auctioning platforms. So we have the ability to pull those properties behind the door before they hit the auctioning platforms, which is extremely powerful, friends. So it's a win-win. It's a win for you as the investor because you are not placed in the position of a bidding war where you're going to most likely overpay for the property, not be able to finance the deal, or worst of all, buy sight unseen, right? So you don't want to be in that position, which may happen also at the auctioning platforms, which is like the judicial auction from the courthouse, but just an online version of the bidding platform, right? So you don't want to be in that situation. Therefore, it's a win-win, right? The bank is going to avoid all these commissions. They're going to avoid the holding expenses, and us, we're going to be able to buy the property without competition, right? Zero competition, because we can intercept the property before it hits the auctioning platform, which is huge, right? Because not only are we going to be able to fund the transaction through a hard money lender, private money lender, but also we're going to be able to see the property from the inside. We will have zero competition. Therefore, you will not overpay for the property. And what's really powerful, friends, is that we're going to run this inventory, these 1,000 properties, right, through our algorithms to flag just the top deals. And that is the reason why they gave us the inventory, because they saw our system, they saw all the analysis tools that we have, and the banks really like it. Why? Because in order for an investor to make a quick decision, because friends, you only have 4 days to make a decision on the property, do your due diligence. So in order for you to make a savvy decision, guess what, friends? You're gonna need the tools to do the analysis for you very fast. I'm talking within minutes, right? Because let me give you this scenario. Imagine these banks, if you were to get a spreadsheet with about 1,000 addresses, and then you need to make a decision in 4 days, guess what? Tough luck. You will not have the time to go and analyze every single property in that spreadsheet. So that's what the banks are struggling with. They need a solution that gives the buyers, like yourself, investors, the tools to analyze the deals quick enough in order for them to make a quick decision and buy the properties before the banks have to send the inventory to the auctioning platforms or the MLS. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is a speed game, right? So you've got to analyze the properties very fast, do your due diligence. So the way it works, friends, is we get the inventory on Tuesday or Wednesday. So we got the inventory actually today on Wednesday. And we're going to send that out. We're going to put it on the portal. Not only that, but we're going to run those 1,000 properties through our algorithms. And we're just going to give you a spreadsheet that will flag just the top deals, the ones that have a potential profit spread of about 75,000 at least, okay? So I'll show you that in a second. So you can, if it's in the neighborhood area that you're interested in investing, that's awesome. And then you need to do your due diligence, right? So you need to make sure that you have a successful buy and hold and flip and fix and flip exit strategy, right? So that's what successful investors do. They can get out either way, either buy and hold or fix and flip, okay? So we're gonna go over that in just a second. And then finally, if you like the property, if it's vacant, which we highly recommend, right? Because the inventory that we get, it's either vacant or occupied. So we highly recommend for you to stick to vacant properties. Why? Because funding is gonna be easy. If you try to pursue a property that is occupied, it's going to be hard, even for hard money lenders or private money lenders to fund. Why? Because many hard money lenders require to do a physical inspection on the property. That means that they have to go inside the property, okay? And if it's occupied, guess what? They will not be able to go inside the property. Therefore, they're not going to fund the deal. Even if you're willing to pay 10, 15% interest rate, they will not fund the deal. If you're using a private money lender, which is just an individual like you and me, but with tons of money, then they might be okay funding an occupied property. But for the most part, it's even too risky for you, right? Why? Because you don't know what the condition of the property is from the inside, which is critical for you to make a savvy decision as to the rehab estimate of the property. Not only that, but if you happen to buy an occupied property, guess what? You are going to have the headache of getting rid of the tenant. And then let me tell you, if you're like in Cook County, you're lucky if you get rid of the owner or tenant in 6 to 8 months. And not only that, but the owner or the tenant can literally destroy the property from the inside, right? So they're very upset about the whole situation. They lost the property and everything. So they might just take everything and just vandalize the property. So you don't want to buy an occupied property, friends. You want to focus on vacant properties. Okay, for funding, it's going to be easier, and then you can see the property from the inside and then estimate your rehab. Okay, friends. I believe there's a question online. Let me pull up the chat. And then it says, can we get in to see the shadow inventory prior to buying? Yes. So if the property, again, if the property is vacant, you will be able to go inside the property for most of the property. So the bank has already put a lockbox on the property if the property is vacant. But if the property is occupied, you will not be able. And then also for your safety, it's best not to try to enter the property or the premises because you're going to be dealing with disgruntled owners. So for your safety, obviously, don't pursue owner occupied or occupied shadow inventory. Okay, we're going to be focusing only on vacant properties. So you've got to do your due diligence and then go out to the property, check it out, make sure that it's vacant, right? So having said that, friends, I'm going to show you the two types of inventory that we have. I mean, the two types of shadow inventory that we have in the system. And then let's go ahead and find some awesome deals. Okay, so I'm gonna pull up ChicagoDealVault. So I'm gonna show you where you're going to find this shadow inventory. So there are two places where you're gonna find the shadow inventory. So on their off-market properties, you're gonna scroll down and you will find banked on shadow inventory, okay? So this is one place. This is the place where you can reach out directly to the bank because we're gonna give you the bank's attorney information. And the second place is right here. This is the hot shadow inventory, okay? So this is where we get about 1,000 properties a week that we can pull before they go to the auctioning platforms. So let's go ahead and look at this shadow inventory first, okay? So this is the one that you can filter yourself so that it meets your geographic location. So what I've done here is I'm going to filter by county, okay, just to give an example. So I selected Kane, and then something that is very important, friends, the auction date, okay? So what I'm doing here is you want to filter for properties that were went to auction about a month ago, okay? You don't want to go probably farther than that. You can go up to maybe 2 months. I like to do 30 days in the past. Why? Because many banks are going to move these properties very quickly, right? So if I look at some properties, right? If we look at some properties, let's say that the bank took from the auction, let's say 3 months ago. By now, guess what? Those properties are going to be gone. They might be even in the MLS. So you want to look at properties that the bank just recently took from auction. So that is why I like to go up to 30 days. But I've gone even 60 days, right? So some of the banks are very slow, right? Especially some of the smaller banks, they tend to hold on to the properties longer because they don't have a foreclosure department, so they move a lot slower. So you can even find great deals there. But I'm gonna show you how you can check if the ownership of the property has changed, meaning if the property has been sold already. So there's a way for us to check. So having said that, I'm gonna select Kane for the county, and then the auction date, I'm gonna go February 15th, so that's about a month ago, and then today's date right here, and then I'm gonna click on search. Okay, so we found 15 properties that went to auction and nobody bought them, so they became shadow inventory in Kane County. Okay, so what I'm gonna do next is we're just gonna click on one of them. So I'm gonna show you what the numbers look like. I believe we have a question on the line. Okay, so some of the questions are that your Chicago Deal Vault may not have the shadow inventory tab. So friends, if you are on a month-to-month, you don't have access to the shadow inventory. So we call that, if you're in the Lamborghini package, you don't get the shadow inventory. But if you're in the Blue Angel package, you do get the shadow inventory right here, the hot shadow inventory. So for those of you who want to know more about the shadow inventory, I'm going to talk about that at the end of the presentation. But that is the reason why. If you're on a monthly Lamborghini package, you don't get the shadow inventory. But we'll talk about that at the end. Okay, so we found 15 deals. Let me just click on one of them. Let's say Aurora, because I know Aurora, it's an upcoming area. It's a hot area. Okay, so let's quickly look at this deal. So the first thing that you need to look at is when the property went for auction, okay? So the property went for auction about 2 weeks ago. So end of the month, February. So about 2 weeks ago, the property went for auction. So what type of property is this? So this is a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, about 2,000 square feet. This is a hometown, a duplex, okay? So this is something to keep in mind. We're gonna give you the property type. So in the system, you're gonna be seeing attached, which means condos, duplexes, townhomes. You're gonna be seeing detached, like single family homes. And in fact, if I go back to the filtering criteria, I can filter by property type. So I can filter, just give me single family homes, or just give me 2 to 4, or just give me condos, or just give me all types. So usually, if you don't select anything, you're gonna see all types of properties, right? But let's say I wanna do just single family homes, for instance. So we only have 14 properties. Okay, so obviously the one that I picked is not in the list. So the one I picked happens to be an attached home. But just for example purposes, it's fine for now. It's a duplex. Typically, we don't like to pursue attached properties. I'm going to tell you why. Because these properties belong to an association, right? And then since we like to do buy and hold, we have to rent the property, right? So some associations change the bylaws, like not tomorrow, right? So today they would allow rentals, tomorrow they might not allow rentals. So we don't want to be in that position. That is why we try to stay away from attached or townhomes, okay? But if it's a great deal, of course, we're gonna look at it. So let's just quickly take a look at this. So these went for auction end of the month. So about 2 weeks ago, look at the starting bid. So the starting bid was 182,000, but let's look at the numbers. Okay, so this property is worth about 230 to 260. Okay, let's average 250. Okay, and the property went for auction for 182. But let's look at the numbers. The owner owed 245,000. So this is a clear example, friends, that the owner was underwater. Okay, so what does that mean? Look at that. So even the initial loan was for 229, but now, you know, after fees, interest, and so forth, the outstanding balance has gone way over probably what the property is worth. Okay, so this owner was underwater. So this is a great example because this is a candidate for a short sale. So I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But let's just quickly look at the example. So the bank needs to recoup 245,000. They put the bid kind of high because the property could be worth as little as 240, for instance. And if the property needs work, guess what? There's no room here for an investor to make any money. Let's assume the property needs, based on the property size, because this is a pretty big property, about 2,000 square feet. Even though it's a townhome, it's a fairly large townhome, right? So it may need, we're gonna spend at least, let's say 30,000 on the rehab at least, okay? So if we buy it for 182 plus closing costs, it's gonna be about, let's say 186, let's assume 190 plus 30, that's gonna be 220, right? All in 220. And then the property is worth about 240. There's not meat in the room. I mean, meat in the bone, right? So there's not enough profit to be made for a fix and flip. The numbers may work for a rental. We still need to verify that. But you want to make sure that you're able to make money when you buy and hold the property or when you fix and flip the property. So this is not a good deal right off the bat. That is why nobody bought this property, right? So it just, the numbers won't work. And now let me give an example. So if this property obviously went through the foreclosure process, but let me quickly make a parenthesis for you to understand. This owner was underwater. So at this point, the owner has two options, depending on whether the owner wants to keep the property or wants to sell the property. If the owner wants to keep the property, guess what? The owner needs to negotiate a loan modification with Wells Fargo, okay? So that the owner can stay in the property and then still continue to make payments on the property. But obviously that didn't happen. And then if the owner does not want to keep the property, they want to sell the property, what the owner needs to do is they need to negotiate a short sale with the bank. So what that means is that the owner will need to sell the property for less money than what the property is worth. And not only that, but less money than what the owner actually owes. So the owner could have negotiated a short sale for 190,000, for instance, right? And then the owner, if it's authorized, then the owner can sell the property for 190,000. And even though the bank is going to take a cut for about a 50,000 difference, if the bank approves the short sale, the owner is off the hook. That means that the owner can pretty much sell the property. I mean, the owner is not going to net any profit, but at least the credit of the owner is going to be saved, right? Because right now, since the owner went through foreclosure, the credit for the owner is going to get ruined. And then most banks are not going to file, they call it a deficiency judgment, which is the difference between what the short sale went for and what the outstanding balance is. So if the owner, let's assume, sold the property or got authorized to short sell the property for 190, but the owner owed, let's say, 240, there's a difference of 55,000. So the bank has the option to file a deficiency judgment. What that means is that the bank is going after the owner for the difference, and that's going to ruin the credit of the owner. But again, most banks are waiving the deficiency judgment, which is great, right? But in this case, this owner not savvy enough or didn't get enough information as to what the options were for him. So, which is sad because then he lost the property and ruined his credit. So anyway, so this is an example how you can, at this point, let's find another property, right? Because I want to make sure that we find like a good deal. So let me click on this one. Let's say another property in Aurora. So let's just quickly analyze this property. So the auction happened about 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago for 131. The owner owed 143,000. But think of this. Here is because the original loan was 132, which happens to be almost the initial bid, but because of late fees, penalties, it went up, right? The outstanding balance. So the bank needs to recoup 140,000. So how much is the property worth? The property is worth about 100 and let's say 90,000. So if we get this property maybe for 120,000, 110,000, guess what? If we can sell it for let's say 180, we still have some room, right? Especially if it requires like a light rehab. Let's assume that it requires, let's say, a 20,000, 25,000 rehab, and we buy it for 110. The numbers will work, and we'll do that in just a second. So let's assume that the numbers are going to work for a fix and flip. Let me just quickly plug in the numbers. So as I said, if we can buy this property for 110,000, 1, 2, 3, we're going to put in 20,000. Let's put in 25,000 on the property for the rehab. And then the property could be worth about 177,000. So let's just quickly see, calculate what the potential profit is. About 30,000 on this property. Let's see, there's another comment on the line. Where do you check if the property is sold or not? Oh, thank you, Paresh, for asking that. So I was going to tell you. So I'm going to show you whether the property has been sold or not. So let me show you. So let's assume the numbers are going to work on a flip, right? We're going to be making 30,000. So if you want to buy this property, you you have two options to connect to this bank. We're giving you the banks. In this case is US Bank, which is a very large bank. We're giving you the bank's attorney, Codilos, which is #1 attorney for Ariel properties. So again, this is a large bank. So unfortunately, it's going to be very difficult for them to sell you the property. Okay. So the way to find out who the owner is, you're going to scroll down and then you're going to click on the tab that says owner loans. Okay. So in here, okay, so this property, let me look at this. So look at this. The owner or the defendant is Don. And in this case, Don shows still as the owner, okay? But already the bank took possession of this property about 3 weeks ago, but it takes about 30 to 60 days for to record the deed. So this is gonna change to US Bank very soon. So at this point, we can be sure that this property has not been sold yet by US Bank. So it's still in the bank's assets or books at this point. Let me see, there's another question. It says, who is a plaintiff when it states sold to plaintiff? Okay, so the plaintiff is the bank. So look at this. So the plaintiff is the actual bank. So plaintiff in a lawsuit, the plaintiff is the person or individual suing. So in this case, the bank is suing, and then in this case, the owner will be the defendant. So the plaintiff is always the individual, the company that is suing, right? And this is the bank's attorney. Another question: how do you find the lien info? Okay, so this property, look, it has more liens. It has a lien from Illinois Housing Development Authority for $7,500. Okay, so here we're going to show you any additional liens that this property has. So obviously, when you buy the property from the bank, when they convey title to you, it's going to be free and clear of. It's going to be a clean title. Free and clear of any liens, okay? So you don't have to worry about these. You would worry about these if the owner was still if Don was still the owner, then you would still need to satisfy these liens or pay these off. But since the bank took possession, when you buy a property from the banks, they're gonna convey clean title, okay? So you don't need to worry about these liens. So they're gonna be all clean. title-wise. So another question. Okay, so Jesse, so you're not seeing the shadow inventory. Oh, okay, so we're gonna look at the shadow inventory next, Jesse. And yes, indeed, your filtering criteria for the shadow inventory is gonna be slightly different as mine, because we can connect with the asset manager directly from ChicagoDealVault. I can send a message to the asset manager, but we do not allow our members to send a message to the asset managers. Why? Because the asset managers want to deal only with one individual. So all the communication goes through ChicagoDealVault between the asset manager and you. So you contact us, and then we're going to do the communication on your behalf. We're going to be communicating with the asset manager on your behalf, because the asset manager, because we know how the system works, right? So let's assume that we give you access to the asset manager. You might be asking questions that, you know, the asset manager doesn't assumes that you know, right? So they don't want to work with too many people. So they're just going to be communicating with us. But you can send us a message when you're interested in a property, okay? So great questions, great questions. So the plaintiffs, again, is the individual company that is suing the defendant, in this case, the owner, okay? So like that, you can, the first thing that you need to look at when you look at this shadow inventory is who the plaintiff is. If it's a large bank, again, your chances are very low. Even if it's an awesome deal, friends, your chances to get the property from a large bank is very slim. Why? Because they have a big foreclosure department, right? They want to move inventory bulk. They already have their REO brokers. They're going to send the properties to the auctioning platforms. They don't want to take the risk to deal with one investor to sell one property. No, they want to sell bulk inventory. That is why those large banks are giving us hundreds of properties, right? Because they believe our tools are giving investors the right information needed to make a quick and savvy decision on whether they need to move forward on buying the property. Because let me tell you, once we commit on buying the property, there's no way back. Once we sign a commitment agreement that we're going to pull this property from the back door, we've got to follow through, okay? So now let me show you, okay, so two ways to connect to the bank. You can connect, obviously the quickest is via phone, right? You get in touch with the bank's attorney, and then you say, you know, I understand that your client, US Bank, or let's assume it's a smaller bank. I understand that your community bank, ABC, took a property, and then you give the address from auction, let's say 2 days ago. I'm a real estate investor interested in making an offer for your property. And then, so they can either help you, the attorney, or they might refer you to the asset manager, okay? But again, it has to be a small bank. So if I go, that's one way to connect to the banks. Or another way, friends, let me go back to the filtering, is via the mailing campaign system. So you can select the properties you want to connect to, and then pick a letter, right? So we have the templates. So this is another way that you can do a mailer to the bank directly. So print your own letters and labels. So what this is going to do is going to generate the letter that will be sent to the bank or to the plaintiff. Okay, so, okay, it's opening a lot of files. I don't understand why it's doing this, but come on. Okay, so it's opening quite a few files. Give it a second. Okay. Sounds good. So I'm gonna click on that folder again. Okay, so here we're addressing the letter to Nation Star Mortgage. So for instance, Nation Star Mortgage is also a fairly large mortgage company, but again, you can give it a try, right? So you can either do a mailer to the mortgage stating that you're interested in buying the property, right? That they just took from auction. And this is gonna have your signature, your LLC, your phone number, all that information is gonna be in the letter, right? As as well as the labels. So that's one option. And obviously the quicker option is just to get on the phone and call the attorney, right? For the asset manager, for representing the bank, and say, I'm interested in buying the property that you took from auction. But again, remember, you need to focus on small banks. So now let's look at the shadow inventory. So there's another question on the line. It says, before you commit to buy, shouldn't you check the comps? Of course. So before you commit, you have to make sure that you do your due diligence, right? So not only do you need to pull the comps, you need to do a successful buy and hold and fix and flip exit strategy analysis, which I'm going to show you in just a second. So yeah, you've got to do your due diligence to make sure that it makes sense on paper. And also you've got to go buy the property, right? Just drive around the property, make sure it's not in a floodplain, make sure it's not by the train tracks or nothing crazy, right? In a safe area. So yeah, for sure. And then there's a question on liens. What do the lien mean? Okay, so yes, when you buy the property from the sheriff auction, yeah, all the liens are cleared. And the lien is just when a creditor is owed money, they put a lien on the property. That's just a way to secure the fact that they need to get paid when the property gets sold. So that's what a lien is. Okay, so now let's look at the hot shadow inventory, friends. So this is the hot shadow inventory. So I'm gonna go to shadow and then target. So here, friends, this is where you can filter the property. So we have about 700 properties, okay, that we got this week. In fact, we're going to be updating this today because we got the new inventory today. So we're going to be pushing the latest inventory later tonight. So we got several hundred properties today. So we're going to be loading the deals. And not only that, but we're going to be flagging the hot deals. So here you can filter by city, by zip code. So the cities that are going to show in the dropdown are the cities where we have properties, okay? So we're going to give you only the cities where we have shadow deals. So for instance, Park Forest, I'm going to search Park Forest. Okay, so we have 5 properties in Park Forest. And as you can see, this is so important, friends, the occupancy filter. Remember, I told you, you've got to focus on vacant properties. Do not focus on occupied properties, because occupied properties, you're not going to be able to fund easily. And if you're able to fund them, you're still going to have the headache of the owner, right? How do you get rid of the owner? That might take you months. Not only that, but the holding expense on the property. So try to avoid that. There's another question. Okay, so the question is, how do you know if the first or the second lease is causing the auction on the property? So that's a great question. So if the property has 2 liens, let's say from Chase and the other one is from a credit union, right, that issue a home equity line of credit, it doesn't matter which triggers the foreclosure. It could be the HELOC or it could be the primary loan. Whichever filed first, it doesn't matter. They will both have a position, first and second. So typically the first position is gonna be owned, or it's gonna be held by the bigger loan. So when you buy the property and then let's say they require you to pay 20% down, so the 80%, whoever puts the 80% down, which is let's say the hard money lender, the private money lender, they're going to have first position, okay? And then if, for instance, you have tons of equity in the property and then you tap into your equity and get a second loan, a home equity line of credit, that's going to have a second position. So the smaller loan amount is going to have a second position. But the second lien position, let's say the HELOC, they can't start the foreclosure process, okay? And if they start the foreclosure process, it doesn't mean that they're going to get paid first. It's still they're going to be second position, but either one of the 2 creditors can't initiate the foreclosure process. So we've seen cases where the smaller loan lender started the foreclosure process. And obviously the first position, the bigger lender will benefit as well. Because as soon as the property gets auctioned off or bought, then they're going to get paid. Okay, so great question, Paresh. Okay, so now let's look at this inventory. So my first filter will be vacant. So one of these property, 2 of them are occupied out of the 5. So we're just going to eliminate those right off the bat. So we're going to be focusing on the vacant property. So I'm going to click on the first one in Park Forest. Okay, so what's really powerful, friends, is that we're going to tell you how much you need to pay for the property. And what's really amazing is that, for instance, this property that we just found in Park Forest could be worth twice as much. So the bank is asking for $107,000, plus you're going to be paying closing costs, and you're going to be paying some of the buyers, some of the sellers' closing costs. So your closing cost expenses are going to be not the typical 2 to 3%. It's going to be like the 5% for closing expenses. So you need to account for 5% at least on this type of inventory. So the bank is not going to pay any closing costs. So you're going to need to pay closing expenses on both sides. So account for a 5% closing expenses, okay? So this is 5,000. Instead of 3,000, you're going to be paying like 5,000 for closing expenses. Okay, so let's assume that you buy the property for 115, right? This property could be worth, so there's a lot of room, right? 200,000, which is that's just a great deal right off the bat. So this is a 4-bedroom, 4-bath. Oh my goodness, that's fairly large. Over 3,000 square feet property in Park Forest. Okay. So, but again, what Greg was saying, of course, you've got to do your analysis, right, to make sure that it makes sense to buy and hold the property, fix and flip. Not only that, but be able to pull the comps. So let's just go through that exercise right now. I want to make sure that I can assess the market value of this property. So I'm just going to scroll down and then go to the comps, which is the default tab. And then we are going to click on the search button and see what happens. Okay, so what I need to do is I'm going to need to expand my search criteria. There's a question right here on the line. So it says, can you offer less than 107 on this property? No. So the property, the price that it says, that's what it is. Think of this as CarMax, right? So when you go to CarMax, there's a sticker price on the window, and you're not going to pay a penny more or a penny less. It's the same way. Whatever number you see, that's how much you're going to pay, okay? 107. So this price is not negotiable, which is really cool, right? Because you know upfront how much you're going to pay. Because guess what, friends? If we don't take action, this property is going to end up in the auctioning platforms like Hubzu, auction.com, and guess what? You will not know what this number will be. They will just have a starting bid. It could be 60,000, right? And then from there, people need to start bidding up and up and up and up. And obviously, next thing you know, you are well over 107, right? So the cool thing about this inventory is that you know what the asking price for the bank is. And then in technical terms, they call this the reserve. So when you go to the auctioning platforms, they call this number the reserve. So once the reserve is met, then they can obviously sell the property. So this is, in other terms, the reserve price. Okay, so let's put some comps. So this is a fairly large property, 4 bedrooms, 4 baths. So I want to find properties that are 3 to 4 bedrooms, 2 to 4 baths, and then that's sold in the last 6 months. And the square footage is just within the ballpark. This has 3,300, so between 26 to 39, and then within a 2-mile radius. Let's see what we can find in this neighborhood. Okay, we found one property which happens to be very close, but it sold for 170,000. Okay, so this property sold for 170,000. So still, friends, you're only paying 107 plus all the closing expenses. So this is going to be 115. But if the property, let's look at the comp. So I'm going to click on the comp and then view the details of this property. So this property is a 3-bedroom, 3-bath. 32, so the square footage is very comparable, right? The subject property has 3,300 square feet, but it has just one less bathroom and one less bedroom. So let's just quickly look at the pictures. So this property is needs some rehabbing, right? It's sort of dated in its flooring, for sure painting, kitchen, bathroom. So it just needs an overall update on the property. And this property sold in 40 days for 170. So this tells me that this property, the subject property, could be worth what we were thinking. It could be worth close to the 200,000, right? Because this property is bigger. But again, we don't know the condition from the inside. I'm gonna click on Street View. Let me see, I can toggle back and forth. Is my Street View coming? So you can toggle back and forth and look at the Street View, but still you have to go drive by the property just to check it out, right? Just to make sure that it makes sense. But at least we know this property could be worth potentially at least, I would say 175, because the comp that we saw requires a lot of work, right? And they sold it for 170. So the least that this property will be worth is about, I would say 170. Okay, so it's 107 that we're going to pay for this property. So obviously we can do the rental analysis. So we're going to tell you that if you rent this property, you can get about $19.50 for the rent, and then all you need to do is plug in some expenses right here. And if you don't know the taxes, all you need to do is click on the owner loan. That's going to give you what the taxes are for the property. Right here, oh, here you see the owner. It's already the mortgage company, so they took possession of the property already. Otherwise, you would see the owner's name, so like an individual. But at this point, this is the plaintiff. So this is who sued the owner, and they took possession of the property. So the property is already under their name, and the taxes are, whoa, the taxes are pretty high, 10,000. 10,000. So that is why it's important to do your due diligence, friends. Let me go back to the subject property, because in some areas like Flossmoor, Olympia Fields, taxes are just outrageous, and taxes can kill the deal. So 10,000 for taxes. So if I pull up my calculator, let's just quickly run the numbers on these properties. So 10,000 divided by 12. So it's about 833 for taxes. And then insurance is going to be about 100 for this property. Management fee, let's manage the property ourselves. So I'm doing the rental analysis. So maintenance, let's see, about 100. Utilities, these are going to be paid by the tenant, right? And then we're going to be paying for the property, I would say 110, 115,000 for this property. 1, 2, 3. And then the rehab, let's do 40,000 because it's on the 40,000. So the rehab could be up to 60,000 based on the square footage. So I'm gonna go on the rehab a little bit higher. I'm gonna go 45,000. 1, 2, 3. And then let's just calculate. So the cash flow on this property is gonna be 423. Okay, now let's do the fix and flip. So we know at least this property could be sold for 170, but 170 requires a lot of work, right? So I know this property after repair, so after you do all the work, this property could be sold for at least 200,000. Okay, I'm going to be very conservative. 200,000. The rehab, we're going to do 45,000. Whole time, we're going to do 6 months, 2 for the rehab and 4 for the market time. We're going to pay 5% commission. And then utilities, we're going to be paying for the utilities. So it's going to be about, for this size property, it's going to be no less than 175 a month. Insurance is going to be about 100. Taxes, 833. Taxes are a huge expense. We're going to be paying for the property 115. 1, 2, 3. And then let's see what the numbers look like. So if we try to do a flip on this property, we're going to be making 22,000, or we're going to be cash flowing 423 a month. So the numbers make sense. Okay, it's not like a huge deal, because let me tell you, friends, I would not do a that takes 6 months to make 22,000. It just doesn't make sense, right? What I would do on this property is I would either buy and hold the property, or because you're going to be cash flowing, and then pretty much the tenant is paying for your property, and then you're cash flowing. So this is the better approach. But we like to target properties that we could do either or. I want to be able to do a fix and flip and make at least 30,000, right? So we like to make at least a 30% on a flip. So for every 100,000, we want to make 30,000. Some people are okay with making 20% on every 100,000. So if they invest 100,000, they want to make 122,000. But again, the problem is that this is a large house, over 3,000 square feet. So your holding time, your time is going to go up. That is why I don't think it makes sense to do a fix and flip, okay? It's too big of a house to do a fix and flip, okay? So this makes sense to either wholesale the property or buy and hold, but it doesn't make sense to do a fix and flip, okay? And then, friends, this is the button that you do not have access to, inquiry button. You see this inquiry button right here. So this is how I would connect to the asset manager and say, is this available? Available. Okay. So this is how we communicate. You do not have access to this button. This is only us. So when you send us a message to support at Chicago DealVault and you say, hey, Hugo, or support, can you check if 25 Woodland is still available? Because I'm interested in the property after you've done your due diligence, right? Pull the comps, run your calculators. After you've done all the research, gone to the property, if you still want to follow through, then just say, is the property still available? So then we're going to communicate with the asset manager. They're going to respond and say yes or no. If it's yes, and you still want to follow through, then we can sign a commitment agreement and then close in 3 weeks using a hard money lender or private money lender. Okay, friends, does this make sense so far? I mean, this is extremely powerful data, because if we're getting about 1,000 properties a week, I mean, how many home run deals do you need a year, right? Even if you get 2 home run deals a year, that's just awesome, right? You don't need any more than 2 home run deals that you can make 50, 60,000 a year, right? So friends, let's just quickly summarize what we talked about today. So what we did today is you understood now much better what shadow inventory is, right? So that's when the property goes for auction, nobody buys the property, then the bank is going to take possession of the property. And then the bank is going to dispose of the property in about 1 to 4 weeks, up to 2 months, right? So that is why you want to filter the shadow inventory that went for auction in the last month or 2 months, okay? And then remember, if you're going to go after shadow inventory from the off-market properties, remember to go after the small banks. Don't waste your time going after the Chase, the Bank of America, because they're too big. They won't sell you one property, okay? So if, and then the second shadow inventory is the one that we get from large banks that we can pull before those properties hit the MLS, before they hit the auctioning platforms, we can pull them. Okay, so this is extremely powerful inventory. But again, you've got to do your due diligence using the tools that we're giving you and showing you how to pull the comps, do your buy and hold and fix and flip successful analysis. And if you're able to get inside the property, you can do your rehab estimate. So right here, we have a rehab estimator. So you can go line by line, depending on the category, exterior, interior, HVAC, plumbing, electric, just to come up with a more accurate estimate for the rehab. We're going to give you the cost for the labor, material, for pretty much anything that you are going to do on the property. Okay, so there's a question on the line. So I have the Blue Angel package. Can you help me with the deal? Yeah, of course. So if you are in the Blue Angel, we are going to help you. In fact, we can partner up with you. Let me just quickly give you an example of a property that we closed on last Wednesday. It was from this inventory. So let me show you the property. This is the property from shadow inventory that we pulled last week. So right now we are putting the permit to do the work, and then the village of Cicero, you know, they're very hard. So they're having us do inspections for the existing condition of plumbing, electric, roof, and HVAC, which is fine, right? We have the contacts on the preferred partners to do that. So this is a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, about 1,000 square feet. We bought it for $80,000, and then the bank gave us a $5,000 credit, which is unusual. For sure, but we have great connection with the banks. And then the rehab is going to be $20,000. So all in is going to be with closing cost about $100,000, right? So what we've decided on this property is to fix and flip. So we're going to flip it. Why? Because the ARV on the property is $172,000. Okay, so we're going to put in $100,000 and we can sell it for $172,000. So we're going to be making a decent profit, right? And then the rehab is going to take about 2.5 weeks. So we're going to have 4 people do the rehab in about 2.5 weeks. And guess what, friends? In fact, we're doing a really cool event for members only, for ChicagoDealVault members. This coming Sunday, make sure you mark your calendar. So this Sunday, let me pull up the calendar. I want to make sure I give you the right date. So Sunday, St. Patrick's, on Sunday the 17th, we are going to have a speed networking event at Jory at 1:30. But the following Sunday, Sunday the 24th, okay, we are going to come to this property, okay, to this Cicero property, and I'm going to have Joe, our preferred inspector. He's going to go through the property and show you what you need to look at in a property. What are the expensive ticket items, right, that you need to look after when you look at a property. When you check your due diligence from the outside, he's going to show you, or even from the inside, we're going to go outside and inside, the things that you need to be aware of, things that are going to cost you big bucks. So he's going to show you the do's and don'ts, okay, what to look for, what not to look for. So make sure you mark your calendar. We're going to send you an invite. We're going to call you, send you a text message to come to the inspection. We're going to do live hands-on training on how to inspect a property. So this is only for DealVault members. So it's going to be very powerful, friends. We're going to come to this property. So we're going to do a fix and flip on this property. And then, so these are the numbers. If we wanted to buy and hold the property, we would refinance the deal because we're using a hard money lender, and then just tap into 50% of the ARV to pay off $100,000, and we would still have $72,000 in equity, or 41% in equity, which is huge, right? So if we were to buy and hold the property, the rent minus the principal, interest, tax, and insurance, $850, we would cash flow $650. But we're gonna fix and flip the property. So all in is gonna be $100,000. We're gonna sell it for about $172 or so. Okay, friends. So having said that, I just quickly summarize how powerful shadow inventory is. Okay, so make sure that you come to Sunday's event at 1:30 in Jory Boulevard this coming Sunday, and then mark your calendar for next Sunday, the 24th. We're gonna do a hands-on training live inspection, okay, on a shadow inventory, so you know what to look for when you do your due diligence on a property, okay? So having said that, friends, thank you for joining tonight. It's been a pleasure having you as a member, and we look forward to having you on Sunday, live event, speed networking event, and then obviously stay tuned for the next mastermind, next Wednesday, 6 p.m., same time, okay? But I look forward to seeing you in person next Sunday. And guess what, friends? This time, we're gonna bring members from ChicagoDealVault who are private money lenders. So that's going to be very powerful, friends. People who can actually lend you money and who are investors like yourself. So make sure you come on Sunday, 1:30. Okay, thank you, friends, and have a great night.